Tavai-vasmi, na jivami tvaya vino, iti vigyairadhitam naimam charanantikam, yat kinkreshu bhausa kalu kakavani, nityaparasya purusha shashakandamuli, tashakadara sanidhi visabhanujas, tatkeli kunja bhavanangana mahajani shama. Vajami radha raravinda netram smarami radha madhura smitasham. Vadhami radha karuna parajam tato mamanasti gati nakapi pakita vahino yapurada lakshay shiptascha kamari tarangamaje kripamayi tvang sharanang prapana vrinde namaste charanaravindam kanaka jaladagatro nila sobhagya netro Rigumaravarabalo malati kundamalo Tarana vesho nilampitambaresho Smaranini brittini kunje Radhika Krishna Chandro Vancha kalpatrubhyascha Kripa sindhu vaivacha Patitana pavanebhyo Vaiṣṇavebhyo namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Anandavad Pranam devotees. So it's almost like a miracle. As soon as I finish the Stav and Stuti, it's like there's a full house of devotees. So I don't know if the Stav and Stuti calls the hearts of everyone. And I'm very happy to see Rajashi Prabhu is on. Jai Haribo. So you're able to escape from work today and get on Haribo. Very good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started because our class...
I actually do have to work later, but I was very blessed to be able to start later today.
All right, good. So we're glad to have your presence. So I will go ahead and get started because the class may be a little lengthy today and we have a lot to cover. This particular subject is really important. And in fact, I was over at the ISKCON temple yesterday. It was really sweet visit. I don't get a chance to go on a daily basis, only because of the amount of doing writing, answering questions of devotees, so many different things here, and then doing our own Bhajan life and Ṭhākuraji Seva, chanting on my rounds, all these things. But I was able to make it over yesterday. I'm going to try to start going every Saturday because there is a little bit of a break in everything I have to do on Saturdays. It was just really sweet. The temple president there, Mother Mukhya, she's really nice and does an amazing job considering how large this community is of keeping everything organized and keeping everything going on a very nice flow. So, but that said, I did speak to some devotees, and one devotee, they had a question after the class was about the process of bhakti. And I've heard similar questions before, and it regards how to understand the psychology that takes place when an aspirant takes to the path of bhakti. So we know that there's a lot of philosophical information, and we know that there's a lot of practice information, like do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. But there is, by the mercy of Śrīla Vishwanath Chakravartī Ṭhākura, in our parampara, he's one of the most esteemed of the acharyas in our parampara. So just after Baladev Vijabhushan, when you're counting back in our parampara, he was the Siksha Guru of that Baladev Vijabhushan Prabhu, and he was named Viśvanātha Chakravartī Ṭhākura. The samsara prayers that we sing in the morning called Guru Ashtakam, they were written by Viśvanātha Chakravartī Ṭhākura. Many of our acharyas, including our Srila Prabhupada, rely heavily on the commentaries of Srila Viśvanātha Chakravartī Ṭhākura in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. His commentary is called the Sartha-darshini. So he's very esteemed in our line. And the amazing thing is that he wrote a book which detailed the psychology that takes place when you come on the path. So I'm going to explain from the Mādhurya-kādambinī, which is the name of the particular book, exactly the way he analyzes the psychology of the practice. What happens, what you go through in your unfoldment, the different description of the obstacles that take place, and so forth. Because we know that the nature of the practice itself having sādhu-saṅga, chanting Harināma, hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, trying to absorb yourself and living in Mathura. It says Mathura Vas. So that means if you can't live there physically, at least by mind, you should absorb yourself in the mood of a Brajavasi, and then serving your deities, whether it's in your home or in the temple, right? And of course, Harinam is also our deity. So it means chanting your Harinam also is like deity seva. Of course, externally, we do service to the deities to break the idea of our own self being the focus of life. So for instance, every day we have to get up, we have to wake the deities up, we do cooking so that the deities can have an offering, we clean the temple and so forth and so on. All these things are to make the deities in your home or in the temple the prominent focus in your life, and to remove the idea of my self-interest being prominent. That's why when we take initiation, we all receive the suffix to our name, das or dasi, because that is the attitude or mood or the constitutional reality of who we are. So that's why the deity saver is there. But here, Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur, he's speaking about what happens psychologically when you take up the practice, and it's very important. The book Mādhurya-kādambinī is available in English, and I would suggest if devotees want, they can go on the Pure Bhakti website and you can order this book. I've had various iterations of the book, but when it came out with my Gurudev's commentary, then I, obviously gravitated towards that one. And actually every Thursday, I believe it, every Friday rather, Thursday or Friday, now I'm getting my sequence mixed up, we actually are studying that book on our regular phone conference. So let me begin to go through what Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur has spoken, because I don't want the class to go too far beyond. I have some guests coming at a certain time, and I don't want to go beyond our time too far. So he mentions that, first of all, the conditioned souls in this world, it is a matter of extreme great fortune that they come in contact with the peripheral activities of bhakti. Like you bought a book from a devotee, you got some prasadam somehow or another, or you heard a kirtan party, or you saw the devotees actually doing Naga Sankirtan. All of these things are called Sukṛti. The word Sukṛti in English means pious credits towards building the impressions in your heart regarding the path of bhakti. When those Sukṛtis have accumulated to a significant portion, it affords one the possibility of actually coming in contact in a more significant way with a sadhu. So if everybody looks back kind of at their sojourn in bhakti, it kind of ran along those lines. Maybe you heard a kirtan party, you visited the temple one day, you got some prasadam, something happened and they accumulated and you decided to visit the temple. Then you met someone whom was significantly steeped in the practice and understanding, and you began to hear from that person, and therefore your faith now has grown, and you start to take to the process with a desire to actually walk the path of bhakti based on that sequence I just spoke. Now he mentions once you enter the path, there will still be influences from your previous life, because we don't live one life is everything. We're living in a sort of karmic iterations one after another. So this has been going on from time without any beginning. It's mentioned in Sastra, anadi avidya yuktasha. The connection to our conditional life is anadi. The word anadi, Jiva Goswami has described it, literally means something that has no beginning. But then in his definition, he also says it does have an end. So I've gone over that many times here, so I won't elaborate on it. But something has no beginning and but does have an end, it's called anadi. So because we've had connection with the material world from time without any beginning, so there was no fall of the jiva. We didn't one day we're in the spiritual world and fell here. I've already gone over that many times, but just to make it clear, that's not what happened, right? So over that long duration of time in association with the material energy, we have developed impressions from that material energy. Those material impressions, once we come to the path of bhakti, also come with us, and there's a process for recognizing them and then being able to gradually move beyond them. So the first thing that Vishwanath Chakravartī Ṭhākura does is he points out the 4 different categories where these kind of material impressions come from once we enter the path of bhakti. So he says that in the previous life, there may have been duskrita utta. The word duskrita means sinful life. So we did some things which were not good, not progressive towards our spiritual advancement, some things which under the inspiration of sense gratification were actually sinful things. So those impressions also come with us into the next life. Then he said there's also Sukṛti utta. I already mentioned the word Sukṛti means pious. So many people don't only have sinful life, but they've also done good things. You've given in charity. You've helped someone. You have, done some kind of service to humanity in some way, form, or fashion. So these things are called Sukṛti utta. Here, this word Sukṛti doesn't mean spiritual activities. It means material, pious activities. So those 2 things, whatever you did sinfully, whatever you did that was pious, travels with you into your practice of bhakti. Then there are aparādhas. Now, the last 2 things that are mentioned, the next 2, are things which are related to bhakti. So it says here, aparādha utta. So aparādha utta means previously in your practice, there were some things you did that were not correct. Like maybe you were worshiping the deity, but you made some mistakes. Maybe, God forbid, that you subtly, in a minor way or in a major way, offended a devotee. If you, in a major way, offended a devotee, then it's very difficult to take up the path of bhakti because it's mentioned, Vaiṣṇava-aparādha utte hoti mata. To compare that the offense to a Vaishnava, a serious offense to a Vaishnava, is compared to a mad elephant in a garden. So then it says, upari vaichindi. Upari means that the root of your practice is uprooted. Vaichindi means that the creeper is broken. Therefore, the leaves of the creeper shrivel up. So he's saying here, when you see a person has a hard time in the practice, a severely hard time in taking to it, or you see that a person maybe have been practicing for some time and suddenly they have, like recently, I don't want to mention the name here, I never do. There was an article by a devotee who had been practicing for 30 years and had gone through every single status in the social fabric. They were sannyasi, they were a guru, everything on the surface level. But after 30 years, they had an epiphany that science was more real than the practice of bhakti. So just think about that. 30 years, having even come to the level where purportedly they were sannyas, guru, everything else, but they had a sudden epiphany that science and evolution, all these things, superseded the knowledge that's given in bhakti. This is directly, when you understand the psychology of aparādha utta, is the result of an aparādha where that creeper of bhakti was uprooted, and therefore the leaves of bhakti, meaning the fruits that were being gleaned from the practice, dry up, and they don't nourish you anymore, and therefore you cannot sustain your practice in bhakti. So aparādha is one of the most dangerous things. Then it says also bhakti utta. Bhakti utta means we were previously practicing bhakti, but we simply did not obtain our perfection. So whatever we did in that previous life has carried over to this life. It's mentioned very clearly that when you practice bhakti, nihabhrakamana shosti pratyavayo na vijete. So we should never have fear that if I did not obtain my perfection in this life, everything is lost. It's not a one and done thing with bhakti. Whatever we have done up to the time we leave this world, that credit, that spiritual credit, that advancement in bhakti is not lost. In the material world, you could become super wealthy, super famous, but after you leave this world, all of that is gone. And according to your karma, you have to take birth, and you may be extremely poor, you may be extremely destitute, so many things. You understand? So while material things don't translate into our next life in the same way materially that we might have had in this life, whatever we have done spiritually is never lost. So suchinam shinmategehe yoga basta vijayate. In the next life, we'll get circumstances which are completely conducive to picking up the practice of bhakti again. So this is called bhakti utta. So it means there were activities in bhakti performed, but they were incomplete or they were not fully manifest in that previous life. So again, the four things: sinful activities, pious activities on a material level, then two things related to bhakti. Having performed bhakti, but in the course of performing it, an aparādha was committed. If it's a minor aparādha towards Harinam or towards your deity seva, the continuum of the practice will help alleviate that. If it was an offense to a Vaishnava, until you get the mercy of that Vaishnava, or you spend a lifetime, it says, of service in remorse, serving other Vaishnavas, then it's very difficult to get free from that, and that will be a great impact on your ability to go forward in bhakti. The last thing is bhakti utta, which means activities that were performed, which were favorable to bhakti, but they did not find completion, and therefore now you're picking up the process again from where you left off. Now, those things, when they come together in their unique combination, along with our material aspirations from the previous life and the spiritual aspirations, they come together as a unique bhakti DNA. So I've often called this a karmic portfolio. So that particular bhakti DNA means your previous impressions from bhakti and your previous material impressions come together. They form a karmic portfolio. This is what we have to work with, right? So Vishwanath Chakravartī Ṭhākura then goes on to say, when we take up the practice of bhakti in the very beginning, then we'll have to go through a stage which is called Aniṣṭhitā-bhakti. The word nishta means fixed or firm or established. Aniṣṭhita means the exact opposite. Our practice is not yet firm, it's not steady, it's not progressive yet in its ability to flow without hindrance. Vikram Prabhu, you have a question right quick?
Yes, very quickly. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams. When you're talking about the aparādhas, I understand it that when we do our Tulasi Puja in the morning and we circumambulate, that the circumambulation of Tulsi clears these aparādhas that we've done in the past. And it even specifically mentions even if we were to have killed a Brahmin, right, in a past life. So I'm just curious the reconciliation between the two or how that applies.
Yeah, if you notice in the thing, Yani Kanicha Pabani, Brahma Hatyati Kanicha. Brahmin means any person not really Vaishnava. You understand? They are spiritualists. So it means we should not offend any spiritualist at all. And it says even up to the level, however, of having circumstantially somehow or another committed Brahma Hatya, the killing of a Brahmin even, by sincere practice of bhakti and the circumambulation of Tulsi Devi, then that sin can be taken away. But now, some things in scripture, they're called Atishoki Alanka. Atishoki Alanka means like hyperbole. It's not false, but the point is it's pointing out the glory of Tulsi Devi. It's not meant to encourage Brahmahatya. You understand? It's just showing the glory of Tulsi Devi and the power of service to Tulsi. So not at all is indicating that, well, okay, if you kill the Brahmin, don't worry about it, just come to Tulsi Puja in the morning. Now, that being said, still it doesn't mention, when it says that, anything about Vaishnava. Because Vaisṇava-aparādha, the first aparādha that's listed among the 10 in chanting the holy name is sadhu ninda. And then it says, parama aparādham. This is parama aparādha. And it's mentioned that even the practice of bhakti itself can't alleviate that aparādha. Then in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the story of Durvasa Muni is told, how he offended Ambarish Maharaj. And even when he went to Brahma, he went to Shiva, and then he even went to Narayan, he could not find any relief from that aparādha. Narayan himself told him, you'll have to go back to Ambarish Maharaj and get relief from this aparādha. Understand? So Vaisṇava-aparādha is a very unique thing because we are affected. If somebody offends somebody in society, we also become affected because we're human beings. If somebody offends your mother, father, brother, sister, husband, wife, the depth of that affront to you becomes deeper. You understand? So the Vaishnava being so dear to the Lord, when a Vaishnava, especially a high-class pure Vaishnava, is offended, it is very piercing to the Lord, right? An example of that is given also in the Śrīla, that when the four Kumars cursed Jaya and Vijaya, the Lord came and said, listen, I feel like I've offended you myself. That's how close they are to me. If necessary, I'll cut off my own arm and give it to you. So all of these statements are reflecting the degree of love that Lord Narayan has for these two gatekeepers. Then in the end, he tells Jaya and Vijaya, actually, your curse couldn't do anything. This was all actually arranged by me for my pastime. You understand? So it's a good question, though. Very good question.
Could you perhaps, thank you for the explanation. That I appreciate that. Could you perhaps give just a couple examples briefly of what would a serious offense be to a Vaishnav?
Yeah, the first one mentioned sadhu ninda, to blaspheme a devotee, like to say some negative things about high-class pure devotees, because it means what we've done is we've brought them into the material purview and suggested that they are just ordinary mundane persons and they're subject to our criticism. So this can become aparādha. Now, queries or questions about how to reconcile something is not axiomatically aparādha. It's a question. How do I understand and reconcile this statement? That's not aparādha. So we have to be careful with that too. Someone says, well, I didn't understand why this was said like this and so forth. That's not aparādha. That's a query for clarification to move forward in bhakti. And devotees have to be careful not to assume it's immediately aparādha and couch it as such, because then you can't give sufficient answers to clarify that and help that soul move forward. Okay, is that okay? All right. So Viśvanātha Ṭhākura is mentioning then that when we first come to bhakti, because of that combination of things I just spoke about, the practice, and it's always individual because the nature of these things express themselves differently in each individual person. So it's not a blanket thing that everybody has to go through exactly the same thing. Everybody's previous impressions in the material world and everybody's previous impressions in the practice of bhakti is different. It's not that we're all coming here from a homogeneous state of some sort. Every single person, Jiva Goswami says in Paramatma Sandarbha, is praktik kshetra. The word praktik kshetra means they're their own individual experience. Their consciousness, their field of dealings with the material world and with the spiritual paradigm is all unique to that individual. That's why we can't suggest that everybody has to be on the same level of speed and advancement. Everybody has to start out on the same program necessarily. Somebody may find it very easy to chant 1 lakh of Harinam. Somebody may have a great deal of struggle chanting 4 rounds. So do we suggest that they don't chant at all and just give up the process? We don't. I've seen directly my Guru Padma mention, okay, I want you then to chant this number of rounds, but I want you to be fixed in doing that, because then that will lead to a greater ability by the purification of chanting to go ahead and chant successively more rounds till you come to the standard. The minimum standard Srila Prabhupada set was 16. Understand? So he says, when we first come to the practice, however, having had the experience of suffering in the material world, having had the experience of inadequate relationships in the material world, it doesn't always mean negative. It just means relationships that were unfulfilling. When we come in the practice of bhakti, it is like a breath of fresh air. So that first experience is, I have discovered something which is new, which is enlivening, which is refreshing to what I've been experiencing on a day-to-day basis in my regular mundane life. So now I've come to this process of bhakti and I'm feeling a sense of utsahan or enthusiasm. So the first of the stages of Aniṣṭhitā-bhakti, bhakti that's not really yet fixed on the spiritual platform, or at least fixed, being significantly beyond the influence of the material energy, is called Utsāha-mayī. It means an experience that's filled with a kind of enthusiasm, but Mayi here indicates that that enthusiasm is still based in the self-interest of the individual. Therefore, it's not true enthusiasm. It's based on the fact that I think I found something that's going to relieve all my problems. This is great. Oh, the temple seems great. All the devotees seem great. The prasadam is wonderful. I woke up this morning at 4 o'clock. The air was very fresh. I went to the Mangalarti. The environment was so beautiful. So everything is about a transition of having tried to enjoy materially, but now realizing that was futile, I've taken to a spiritual path, and I'm expecting the spiritual path now to satisfy my self-interest. So I have a great deal of enthusiasm, but it's not premised in the principle of bhakti, which is everything being dedicated to the satisfaction of the Lord, like in the verse, Anya abhilasita sunya jnana-karmarya-navratam anukulyena Krishna anusilanam. So all of my endeavors now in the practice are not towards Krishna anukul. You understand? There's still so much tinge with, oh, this is very nice. I don't have the anxiety I had. Everything seems very wonderful. You understand? So this is called Utsāha-mayī. So a progression from Utsāha-mayī is that once we realize we're in the environment, we're practicing, and for many of us who lived in ashram life, then you're living in the ashram, everything seems good. But now after the first 2 weeks of waking up at 3:30 every morning, when previously I may have had the ability to, at least on Saturday and Sunday, wake up at my own leisure. So now a little bit of a challenge starts to come. Wow, this is like every day, all day, every day, right? It's not subsiding. Every day I have to get up at 3:30. Every day I have to go down. Every day I'm doing Mangalarti. Every day now I have to sit and chant a fixed number of rounds. So now, just like, I'm giving an example. When I was a young child, like anyone else, I used to buy gum. And everybody knows, to the detriment of our health, gum is nothing but a bunch of sugar and whatever kind of chemical plastic thing that makes the gum chewable, right? But I would chew my gum, and then after the sugar was gone, I would take the gum, throw it out, and put a new piece in, right? So we have a habit of always looking for the next thing that's pleasing to us, right? So we don't follow through with things to their conclusion, especially if the things start to become a little challenging, right? So the next iteration from in the stage of Aniṣṭhitā-bhakti is called Ghana-taralā. Ghana-taralā means thick and thin, or sometimes hot and cold. What it indicates is that now a kind of reality sets in about what it is we've taken up. And it's not like those first week, 2 weeks. It depends on the particular individual, where there's a enthusiasm about the newness of the discovery of something other than what I was going through in my material life. Now, this is another life commitment that has things in it which I have to do all the time. So it's like when the sugar runs out on the gum, I don't want to really necessarily give it up, but I'm looking for that next level of taste. And when I see it doesn't come in 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, then I start to get a little thick and thin, or a little wavering in my relationship with the practice. That stage is called Ghana-taralā. But because I'm hearing enough of the philosophy to understand that this is the right thing to do, because I'm also been used to being the doer in my material life. If something goes awry, I will make the adjustment. I'll fix it. So we think the same thing in the initial stages of bhakti. I'm going to fix it. The real problem is I came and I tried to be a brahmachari. So I tried to come to the movement and live in renounced life, but it's not working. So I'll just get married and that will settle it. But then what happens is the mind thinks, yeah, but if I get married, I'll become entangled. I'll have to go back into a material arrangement to make sure my marriage and family life works out. So maybe it's better I stay brahmachari. But I'm having so much struggle just being by myself and going, no, I should get married. So this is called Vyūḍha-vikalpā. The word Vyūḍha means the attempt to arrange or organize things yourself, to attempt to organize them. Vikalp means by your own intelligence and imagination. So not depending on being surrendered to the process, but trying to work out as the doer myself of my circumstances in bhakti, because I can appreciate it's the right thing to do, but I'm not getting that sugar taste that I was getting on the first couple of weeks, month, whatever it might be. So I'm going to try to rearrange it to bring that back. When you try on your own to adjust bhakti, to fix it, Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur says this stage of psychology in the practice leads to something called Vyişaya-saṅgarā. Vyişaya-saṅgarā means when I'm not able to significantly work out a methodology to reproduce that taste, but I'm faced with the idea I simply have to surrender deeper to the process, then I just kind of give up. It's okay, listen, this is just, it's kind of difficult. I'm not going to go back into my former material life, but what I'll do is I'll just make some concessions. All right, I can't really chant every day, so I'll chant some days. I can't really necessarily say I'm not going to hang out with my friends and get some kind of taste. I'll just balance it out. And devotees used to call this dovetailing, right? So I'm going to do some of the things I used to do so I can get some kind of experience of taste in my life. At the same time, I'm not going to give up what I know to be the right thing to do, which is bhakti. So this is called Viṣaya-saṅgarā. Viṣaya-saṅgarā literally means it's like being overwhelmed. And being overwhelmed, I just decide, listen, I'm not going to struggle with it anymore. I'm just going to give into kind of balancing it and make arrangements, right? The next thing that happens is that because we allow that state of mind to take place, naturally our practice starts to diminish. So this stage is called Niyamākṣamā. So Niyamākṣamā means that the practice, our chanting, our attentiveness to hearing Hari-kathā, and other practices of bhakti wane somewhat. Another thing that happens is in Vyūḍha-vikalpā is that while we're trying to adjust to make bhakti again have some taste, we start to look at things that, well, maybe it's something in me that I haven't dealt with. So then we divest some of our faith from bhakti and we put it in another modality. Like a lot of devotees start to go to seminars and go to other things which they feel will do something that bhakti couldn't do. So this becomes subtly, it's not a gross aparādha, but it's a subtle divestment of faith from the process of bhakti, an investment in something else which we hope will help us to have something we didn't find in bhakti. We don't want to give up bhakti, but I'll try this modality or that particular modality to see if it will help, right? But the result of that is that there's a divestment from the process and there's an investment in whatever the modality says we should do. You understand? So this becomes Niyamākṣamā, that there's a sensibility that whatever it is we're doing to try to balance and compromise, it's diminished our ability to have focused practice. Now, the last one speaks to something which is when there's a resurgence, because bhakti doesn't, as I mentioned, go away. So what happens at a certain point is we just see, listen, all the things that I've been trying is not working out. I tried to go to this seminar. I tried to deal with this thing or that thing. None of it really worked out. So I'm just going to double down, even though it's a little difficult, on my endeavors in bhakti. When we double down again, a new wave, Taraṅga means like a wave of enthusiasm comes. And now that we've gone through the fire a little bit, we feel a sensibility of accomplishment. I was able to get through that and still be in bhakti. So now we have a renewed enthusiasm, but what comes along with that is a kind of pride that I did it. This is called Taraṅga-raṅgiṇī. So now a sensibility, yes, I made it through the challenges of bhakti and I came out on top. So now we're practicing, but that pride is also riding the wave of our psychological fluctuations, and having come back to this point of resurgence, now pride is riding that wave with us. So now we're thinking, yes, I'm a very high class of devotee, I'm very advanced, etc., etc. So these 6 things are called Aniṣṭhitā-bhakti. These 6 things during the course of their practice, and don't worry about remembering all of the terms and all the information here. I'm just giving a summary of what Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur wrote, and then we can discuss it afterwards to narrow it down or make it into like a common denominator. Like in math, you try to break everything down to a common denominator. So he says that now what happens from that practice of Aniṣṭhitā-bhakti is that 4 kinds of anarthas, 4 types of 4 kinds of anarthas take place. So here, because sometimes we think, I was searching out the problem that I was having, and I tried to make adjustments, remember Vyūḍha-vikalpā, but I couldn't find it. So he says part of the problem is we conjecture or speculate what the problem is. So he's given what are the essential problems in the practice of bhakti. So they're divided into 4 categories. The first one is called Hṛdaya-daurbalya. Hṛdaya-daurbalya means there's a weakness of heart. The four things that manifest in the stage of having a weakness of heart means when our material impressions become too strong and we don't have the spiritual fortitude to move beyond them, that weakness of heart gives rise to Tucca-shakti. Tucca-shakti means attachment to things which we know now are useless. Like a devotee could know, listen, I had the habit of taking intoxication, doing something else. And even though I know now, having come to the path, this is not correct. In the stage of Hṛdaya-daurbalya, the weakness of heart, Tucca-shakti, the material impressions from my previous life say, go ahead, just one. What's the harm in taking one drink? What's the harm in one time having an illicit affair? So it's only one time. You understand? So this is called Tucca-shakti, right? The second thing is called Kutanati, because we want to be seen in a certain light. We don't want to be seen as a failure at any time. It's just the nature of false egoism. Kutanati means we develop a deceitfulness around the practice, how we present ourselves in public versus how we actually exist in private. You understand? This is called Kutanati. After that, we start to look and say, well, if I'm not perfect, nobody's perfect. So this is called Matsarya or envy, right? And basically what it is wanting to keep a sensibility that nobody's better than I am, because sometimes the word Matsarya is translated outright as envy, but the real definition is I don't want anybody to really supersede what I'm doing. I may not even have malice towards them, but I just want to always be on an equal footing. Sometimes that translates as even bringing down very highly elevated persons. Like we're seeing a trend now, like somewhat of what we discussed last week, where sometimes there's an idea that the pure devotee still has faults and so forth, right? And that idea is to somewhat bring down the idea of a perfection, especially within the category of what we consider to be humans. But that's why Bhagavatam says when you're viewing the pure devotee, Nava Manyeta Karichit, never see Na Matya Burasuyeta. Matya means that the guru, sadhu, pure devotee is like an ordinary person because they're actually a representative of the agency of Bhagavan. You understand? So don't do that. So one of the things that happens in Hṛdaya-daurbalya, because of the idea, I don't want to see that there is a perfection standard. If I'm not perfect, nobody's perfect, right? So because of that, we develop a deceitfulness and envy. And the last thing is, when we are doing well in bhakti, we look for recognition, validation, and approval and glorification for it. So then we start looking for labdha, puja, and pratishtha. Labdha means the attainment of wealth and finances. Puja means that people will worship me and think, oh, you're very great. And pratishtha means the pride that comes along with that. So this is Hṛdaya-daurbalya. Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur is analyzing, this is a genuine anartha. This is a genuine anartha in the process of bhakti. Another one is aparādha again. So, but here he mentions aparādhas towards the holy name, towards service to the deities, and towards other living entities. He mentions those three. Those will not check bhakti, because by being remorseful and repentant and continuing to chant, you can alleviate the offenses made towards the deities, unless it's a gross offense, that's based in malice or something else. But if you accidentally did not put tulsi on the offering, or you accidentally put the tulsi patra, leaf of the tulsi there, but you forgot to wash it. These are all minor mistakes that can be made in the service of the deity. They are minor aparādhas. If you commit a minor aparādh to any living entity, it's still an aparādh. To criticize someone unnecessarily, etc., etc. And of course, there's 10 offenses we see towards holy name, but the holy name itself can rectify that. The other one is Vaiṣṇava-aparādha, which you talked about earlier, right? The only way to get that alleviated is or get that diminished or taken away is actually by the mercy of the Vaishnava whom you've offended. So that's aparādha. Those are the four types: towards the deities, towards Harināma, towards other living entities, or towards the Vaishnava. The next one is called Asat-tṛṣṇā. The word asat means temporary. Trishna means a thirst. So to maintain a thirst for material things, even after having come to the path of bhakti, is a anartha. Anartha literally means unwanted things. They have no value to help you in bhakti, but they plague our consciousness. They're called anartha. So he says Asat-tṛṣṇā is also one of them, which is essentially material desires. Those material desires are also four kinds: trying to enjoy things in this world, trying to enjoy things in heaven, trying to enjoy mystic powers of some sort, or trying to enjoy the idea, well, one day I'll get salvation or liberation. So this mood, which is still primarily based in self-interest, for either enjoyment in the material world through material facility, enjoyment in heaven, like if you listen to a lot of the prosperity gospels in churches, your blessing, even if it doesn't come in this life, is going to be there in heaven. So people maintain their whole spiritual disposition or posture based on getting a reward for it when they leave this world. You understand? Or the idea of getting mystic powers. If you go to many, many pseudo-spiritualists, their whole absorption is in, yes, I'm feeling the spirit. The spirit is speaking through me. And many other iterations of this, right? And I don't want to confuse that with people who have a genuine epiphany or realization. That's a different thing. But there are some people who are just obsessed with being the embodiment of various kinds of mystic power, to the point where those who actually practice to obtain them, like the yogis, if you go to a festival in India, it happens every 12 years, the major one, and every 6 years there's a minor one. They're called Kumbh Mela. In Kumbh Mela is when all the different yogis, rishis, everybody comes out to take bath in the Triveni. It's a confluence of three holy rivers. And at that time, you'll see yogis doing all the stuff that you read about in mystic books. Everything from being able to levitate to this mystic power or that mystic power, you actually are able to see it outright, right? So there are people who absorb like that. And then, of course, those who absorb in salvationism and the idea of liberation. So those are the four kinds of Asat-tṛṣṇā. Last, there is vibhrama. Vibhrama means the illusion or the absence of true knowledge. That is also of four kinds: absence of knowledge about oneself, knowledge about the absolute truth, Bhagavan, absence of knowledge about the material energy, and absence of knowledge about the process and the goal of bhakti. So again, absence of knowledge about oneself, about the Lord, about this material energy, and about the process and the goal of bhakti. So these are four kinds of Brahm or illusion. So all of these are the results that still plague the heart when there is Aniṣṭhitā-bhakti. Now, even when one goes on practicing, because one has I can't give up the practice. I know I'm being plagued by these anarthas. So I know that the remedy for removing anarthas is Harinam. But Harinam also means Hari-kathā. Harinam without Hari-kathā, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ṭhākura has said, is incomplete. So we may think this contradicts the statement that Harinam is everything, right? Sarva Shaktis, Nija Sarva Shakti. In the verse of Shishastakam, it's mentioning there, Namnam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shakti. Harinam has everything. So why are you saying it's incomplete? Because the Nam is not fully Nam if the Swarup, means the intrinsic quality, is not there. The intrinsic quality of Nam is manifest in Bhagavatam. So all of our acharyas have mentioned Harinam is the sound incarnation of Bhagavan, and the literary incarnation of Bhagavan is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, right? So here it's saying that without these two together and under the guidance of a sadhu, then it is very difficult to actually practice Nam. If you don't make that alignment with the sadhu and with Bhagavatam, chanting, one question that came up yesterday that somebody asked me after the class, right? They came up and asked, but what's the situation where I've been chanting for quite a long time, but still I find the difficulty to concentrate, so forth and so on. So for devotees who are less than 25 or 30 years and you're having difficulty, don't worry about it, because even after so many years, devotees are expressing, sometimes it's very difficult, right? Part of the reason for that is because there's no relation between the sound you're hearing and the reality that's expressed in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. They're not two different things. Bhagavatam is the very Swarup, the very personality, the very reality of the sound vibration that you're chanting. If you don't put those two things together, you'll simply hear 32 Sanskrit syllables. I've mentioned this many times. When you start to worship the deity in the temple, you'll make a correlation between these 32 syllables and the 16 names, because you know that Hare means Radha and Krishna means Krishna. So now you're relating it to the deities. But still, that's not a state in which you can transcend the material energy. It's mentioned in the 11th canto Bhagavatam. Acharyam eva haraye shraddha pujalayate natad bhakteshu cha anyeshu sa bhakti prakrita smritaha. The word prakrita means it's material. Even if you're worshiping the deities with faith that the name and the deities are the same, right? Still, if you don't really have deep sādhu-saṅga, natad bhakteshu, then cha anyeshu, you can't understand all the other components which bring those things together in a way that gives realization when you're chanting the name. Therefore, your worship of the deity and your chanting of the Nam in the same mood is still under the category of the modes of nature. It hasn't transcended yet. So you have to two things. One is have deep mood with the sadhu and get the illumination that brings about that when you're chanting, the name itself starts to give you revelation of the very things that are Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. This is called chanting. Just like the first two principles in the 9 processes are Shravan and Kirtan. So Jiva Goswami mentioned what the word Shravan means. Shravan anubhuti bhavati. Shravanam dwaram anubhuti bhavati. When you are doing Shravan or hearing, the doorway, dwaram means the doorway, anubhuti to realization should take place. If you're chanting and you're struggling with just keeping concentration by repeating this same sound over and over again, it's indication that anubhuti bhavati, the realizations of Nam and Bhagavatam being synthesized, is not unfolding in the heart. Therefore, the Rup, Gun, Parikar, Seva, and the Leelas of Bhagavan will not unfold in the flower of the holy name when you're chanting it without making that synthesis. If you don't make that bridge, the Nam can only give you what you're asking for. I just want to chant the holy name my 16 rounds every day. Okay, chant 16 rounds of 32 syllables every day. It's when in your heart you're asking, oh, how can I serve? What is my mood? And when you listen to Srila Prabhupada's early tape describing the Hare Krishna mantra, he says, it's like a baby crying for its mother. So he's indicating mood, begging, oh, energy of the Lord, Srimati Radharani, please me, engage me in the service of Krishna. So it's a synopsis way of describing the synthesis between the knowledge necessary to have attraction to Radha and Krishna's service with the chanting of the holy name and having a mood or sambandha gyan. Right? So if you really catch the purport of what Srila Prabhupada is saying on that tape, this is what it means. So now, when we have come at least to understand the importance of that, and we want to give emphasis to the chanting of the holy name, still, there'll be 5 psychological obstacles to cross, Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur part says. Don't worry about remembering all of them. If you like, maybe later I'll put it within the Bhakti Intensive site. I'll go ahead and put the list in there. The first one is called loy. The word loy means the tendency to sleep or be inattentive while chanting. So the psychology of what happens here is that as you begin to chant, because the names are actually transcendent sound, the names are literally trying to pull you into the position of transcendence. At the same time, the weight of our material impressions is so heavy, so strong, that as the holy name is trying to pull us into the position of transcendence, the weight of the material impressions is not allowing us to move there easily. So in between material awakeness, so-called, means alert to the material energy, and entering the spiritual energy, there's a space there. That is also called loy, or sleeping. I'll give you an example to make it practical. Everybody will relate to it. How many times have you been wide awake and you said, I'm going to go ahead and read Krishna book? So you pick up the Krishna book or you pick up any scripture and you start reading, and as you start reading, your eyes become heavy. Has everybody had that experience? You start reading and all of a sudden you start dozing, you start nodding. You understand? It's because the sastra's trying to pull you into the position of transcendence, where it's awake to your soul, or where your soul rather is awake to it. At the same time, your bodily consciousness is not awake to spirituality, so it's pulling you back in the material world, and you're stuck in that void place where you start dozing off. Soon as you put the book down, you're wide awake again. Soon as you put the book down, you're wide awake again. It's the same thing with chanting. You're chanting your rounds and you're wide awake, right? And then you start dozing. Hare Krishna. Okay, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. As soon as you put your bead back down, then you're wide awake. What's happening? What's going on? You got to make phone calls, so many different things. So this is called loy. This situation that happens as a result of your consciousness shifting from the material paradigm to the spiritual paradigm and being caught in that middle space, right? Which is literally called tatashta. It's not a location, it's a conscious state, right? And in that space, you kind of doze off. I don't want to deal with it here, but in the beginning of the creation, has something to do with the idea that the Lord himself enters the state called yoga nidra. I'm not going to explain that here because I think it will take us too far off of our topic, right? The next thing is called vikshepa. Vikshepa means the material impressions, much like Srila Prabhupada described, when you unplug a fan from the wall, the blades of the fan don't immediately stop turning. So in the same way, even when you take up the process of bhakti, especially beginning with chanting the holy name, it's not that your material impressions just stop automatically. The cycle of the impression still continues to turn. So while you're chanting your Harinam, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, a material impression comes up and wants to be dealt with. Did you call the bank to tell them about the check that you wrote? Hare Krishna. No, I didn't call them. What time do they open? You understand? This is called vikshepa. Vikshepa means to literally pull you away from the state of consciousness that you're striving towards and pull you back based on the rise of a previous material impression. You understand? Now you dismiss that. You go ahead and say, no, I'm not, let me concentrate. And you go back to chanting. Another one arises. So this is called vikshepa. The next one is called apratipatti. The word apratipatti means every day I'm getting up, I'm chanting my rounds. Every day I'm going Mangalarti. Every day I'm hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. But I feel like I'm just in a state where I'm just not advancing. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I feel like this. There's nothing, at least externally, that I can analyze to be wrong. I'm just not feeling enthusiasm. This is a state called a pratipatti. And a pratipatti comes from that, like, you're driving. I'm giving you an example. You're driving your car and you come to a red light. When you stop at the red light, unless you have one of these new cars that cuts off automatically, your engine is still running, but the car's not going anywhere. The engine is still running, and you're still in pursuit of the destination you were going to. I was on my way to the store. I'm still on my way to the store, but this red light has had me stop in the progress of going. I have to stop here, acknowledge this red light. That's what a pratipatti is like. I'm moving on the process of bhakti. Nothing is wrong, but I've come to a red light. In the overall scheme psychologically, really that period is meant for you to stop and get an evaluation of your practice. But because we're not, again, feeling an immediate stimulus coming from the practice, we develop a kind of subtle mood of indifference. I don't know what's wrong. I'm trying. What can I do? I'm trying. My gosh, I'm chanting, I'm reading, I'm associating, right? Everything, but still I'm feeling a sense of, oh, why? That stage is called a pratipatti. Because of that, sometimes, koshai, we go back and we start looking at our bad habits and thinking it's the fault of these bad habits. So this is the reemergence, because remember, these things all work simultaneously. It's not that they're all in steps. So now this Vyūḍha-vikalpā comes back and causes us to have koshai, an examination of our previous bad habits. Oh, the reason I'm not getting the taste is because I previously did this or that or this or that. You understand? And we start disparaging ourselves because we think we must have done something wrong, which is why we're not getting an immediate reciprocation. Fact is, sometimes it's just a stop to make you start to analyze where you have progressed to. It's not always something that's wrong. It's now a time to take a look at, okay, let me do an analysis. Yes, I'm making progress. The store is only a mile down the road, but I had to stop at this red light. That stage is called a pratipatti. The last one is called rasa swad. Rasa swad means when you allow your absorption in the holy name to be usurped by previous material impressions, but those impressions start to flow in a sequence. I'm giving you an example. When you're chanting your Harinam, you're now at a stage where you should be able to have a flow of Hari-kathā manifest as you're chanting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. The whole Narasingha Prahalad Charit can play out as the anubhuti, means the unfoldment of a Leela of Bhagavan in relation to your chanting. So now the capacity for that is there because you've been chanting many years. But what happens is the material impressions, they're still not completely gone because they're not even purna, completely eradicated until the stage of bhav. So now what happens is now those same material impressions come into your space, but now because your mind has started to develop a capacity for playing out whole leelas as you chant, the material impression usurps that ability, and it starts off with Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. You know, John called me the other day. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare. Yeah, we knew each other in high school. Ram, Ram, Hare, Hare. I remember the time we went to the prom together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Boy, we had so much fun. And before you know it, that one material impression is turned into a whole sequence that normally Leela, at least your remembrance of it, not the actual Leela, but your ability to now synthesize Bhagavatam and the flow of Hari-kathā with Nam, the material impression usurps that capacity and plays out a whole material sequence while you're chanting. This is called Rasa Swad. So the taste in your chanting has been usurped by a particular pastime. Man, we had so much fun that night, but we were almost caught. We were doing some bad things, almost caught, but we got away. And before you know it, I got to call him back to get the details of what happened. And your whole 1 hour of chanting has been usurped by a Rasa Swad. Understand? So these 27 things, right? I'm not counting the 4 genesis of it, like Sukṛti, Sukṛti, aparādhas, and bhakti. I'm not counting those. Outside of that, there's these 27 things, 4 types of 4 anarthas, the 6 kinds of unsteady bhakti, and the 5 subtle things in the process of chanting. These 27 things make up the stage of Aniṣṭhitā-bhakti and also make up the stage of the anarthas. You understand? Now, how would we get rid of these anarthas? I'm going to open the floor here, and I want to hear what you think the process for getting rid of these anarthas are. If you know any verse, you can recite that verse. So now we've acknowledged both the psychology of what's happening and the definitions, the actual diagnosis of what has produced that kind of psychological effect in the practice. Right? I know it's a lot of information. So now if we open up and start dialoguing, it'll be very easy to put things in place. So first question I'm asking is, what is the remedy for these things? Anyone?
Can I first mention that if we go on the guidance, Anya Birasita Sunyang Gyana Kamarya Narvatam Anukulena Krishna Nushinalam Bhakti Uttama, is to start serving again under guidance.
Yes, certainly that's under guidance and serving under guidance.
And that way, that mood of Guru,
Yes.
not your mood, but the Guru's mood, nobody else's mood, but just Guru.
Okay, that's perfect. So sādhu-saṅga, we can couch that as sādhu-saṅga and Guru Padasraya. Trivakam Prabhu?
That's basically what I was going to say, was just associating with Guru and recommitting ourselves if there's been a loss of commitment to shelter under Guru's guidance, and then accepting said guidance.
Yep. All right, so that's two powerful advocacies for sadhu-saṅga. What else? I'm looking for one thing that will encapsulate everything, kind of. But anybody else? Any other suggestions?
Yeah. Doing your bhajan?
That's it on the head. If you're doing bhajan life, it is inclusive of all of those things. So the continued flow of doing bhajan is the only way to remove them. Bhajan means chanting Harinam, taking shelter of Guru, hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, etc. These are the elements of bhajan. So the only way to counteract these things is to take more shelter of bhajan life. It doesn't necessarily mean increase in volume. It means increase of intensity of the heart. You understand? But there is not another mechanism. And when, again, I mentioned, sometimes in Vyūḍha-vikalpā, that stage of trying to arrange how to fix it, we think, well, let me check out another modality, or let me make another alternative thing. No, the doubling down on bhajan is the only way to remove the anarthas. So Bhagavatam is mentioning, Nasta-praeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. So tomorrow's class is going to deal with the meaning of all these prayers in a deep way. But here I'm just expressing that here it's mentioning nityam bhagavata sevaya, the idea of an eternal dedication to the service of Bhagavatam, seeing it as non-different from Krishna. Tulya bhagavata Krishna vibhu-savasraya pratishloke pratyakshale nanartatai. Every syllable of Bhagavatam is filled with so many meanings about the nature of the Lord. So simply Nitya Bhagavat Seva, the idea of eternal service to the persona of Krishna in the form of Bhagavatam, Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu, that alone, the word Prayeshu in Sanskrit means will almost completely, in other words, predominantly remove Abhadra. Abhadra is the same thing as Anartha. Understand? So doing bhajan life is the ideal. And even it mentions in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, what is this verse? Jatashara, what is this verse? Even if a person has developed, Jatashara matkattado, nirvigna savakamashu. Even if a person has developed a attraction to hearing Hari-kathā, but nirvigna savakamashu, but they have not completely surpassed their material impressions, right? Then it mentions there that one should go on practicing bhakti. Because if you go on practicing, if you go on with nishchaya, means a conviction that this process will work. And you can have a sensibility of remorse. Okay, I didn't meet the standard. But honestly, with my guru, I discussed it, and the compassion of guru and my striving, then I will go on doing this process with deep determination. You understand? This is the recommendation in the 11th canto. The Navyogunjas is telling this to Marjanimi. So even if a person sees that, Veda dukatmakam kamam, parityajopi anishwaraha, even I can recognize that something is not good for me, but I've succumbed to it somehow or another, right? Because of being overwhelmed by the previous material impression, still go on and double down on doing bhajan with a sense of remorsefulness and a sense of nishchaya, means conviction, to not do that thing again. Bhakti will actually take effect and show its mercy. So that was the answer, incomplete. Doing bhajan life, which is inclusive of all the other things, predominantly sadhu-saṅga that was mentioned by Indulekha Didi and also by Trivikram Prabhu. All right, so we're going to open up for questions here in general about this. I know it was a lot of information. Again, I will try to go ahead and post this in the Bhakti Intensive, the short list of all these things that I have here, so you can look over them. I've typed in some notes to help with the English, but I'll go ahead and do that. All right, any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat pranam to everybody.
Dandavat.
So it was really a lot, but the essence and you were asking a question that how we can get rid of the aparādha. The first thing, as Hindu mentioned, as the name, whatever the topic you are suggesting today is anisthaya. So means it is not stable. And then there is another nischaya, means stable. So
Yes.
stable bhakti is always under the guidance. Without guidance, if you do the bhajan, all 27 things, whatever you told, will somehow or another will keep coming. And I think I always get scared, and I think most of the people, by listening to this lecture, must have got scared that, oh my God, doing so much, and God forbid the aparādha can happen. What will happen to us? After 30 years, become guru, become higher class of devotee, writing books. If the people can give it up, then what is our fate? So what I have understood, and I think Bhumipati Prabhu always mentioned in the class, you have mentioned also several times, this is reminder to me and just sharing with others, that yes, we do not have to do aparādha, and especially the Vaiṣṇava aparādha is the worst, but we have to also see against whom we are talk. First thing, we should not criticize to anybody, even if they are Vaiṣṇava or not Vaiṣṇava. That's very difficult because human has four kind of drawback in their nature. They will do it. Even I will do it too. So, but there are four kind of people: general person, like normal people,
Yes.
then pious person. They do a lot of activities, whether it is related to God or not, but it may be related to the human society, and sometimes also like making temple, distributing prasad, but maybe for their own gain, getting name and fame, not for pleasing Krishna. So that is called pious people.
Yes.
Third kind of people is people aspiring to become Vaishnava,
Yes.
like maybe me. So if somebody does aparādha to me, I'm not fully Vaishnava. So they are not going to take, their aparādha will not be that great that their bhakti will be like dried up or something. But real Vaishnava, the criteria of the Vaishnava is that he is not like attached with the material things. He knows the Shastra. He's always chanting, serving Lord. There are so many others, but these are the criteria. So if you see somebody who is like that, surely we should not do any kind of aparādha against that person. But other three person, even if we do, we should not do. But suppose we have done it also, it is only a sin. It is pāp. It is not aparādha. So do not be scared. We should be always follow under the guidance, as we are following every evening under the guidance of Bhumipati Prabhu and other high class Vaishnava. Sunday under the guidance of you. Sometimes so many Maharaj comes under the guidance of them. So just do the bhakti under the guidance, or if nobody is there, at least remember your guru. That will help you not to make any aparādha.
Yes. This is a very, very important statement, but just one small thing. Also, you, in your own humility, may say, but I'm not that kind of Vaishnavi. But if anyone else will think like that, it will be aparādha. It could be deep aparādha, because that mood will lead to offending even pure devotee. Understand? So from our perspective, Raghunath Bhatt Goswami used to say, Vaishnavera ninda nahi pade kane Shri Krishna bhajanakari sabe e matra vichare. So he's saying in one verse, he's saying, I never want that the ninda of any Vaishnava should pass through my ear. I consider all are doing Krishna bhajan. Matra means according to their capacity. So they should not say, oh, well, I offended Asha Didi, but she's not like this, or she's not like, because actually then even that thinking will bring the same result as offending Parama Vaishnava, because it's in the mindset. You understand? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as you're mentioning, broke down those four categories: the ordinary jiva, the pious jiva, Vaishnava-Praya, and Sudha Vaishnava. But no one should think, oh, well, that was just, I just offended like Mukundo, I just offended Virginia Nandan or Asha Didi or something. No, if you think like that, then it will rise to the level of Paramaparad. Because even those Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, they're under the shelter and protection of the Parama Vaishnava. Understand? But very good.
Yeah.
Okay, Ishopanishad, then Gail, then Bhumi Prabhu.
Radhe, everyone who is here. This is Tulsi Shakti speaking from my mother's home.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Good for you.
Good, Baba. So a few things really got my mental activated as you were sharing this class. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe one day we could have another discussion, thought piece on Bhajan. Because sometimes I know that terminology is very, very important when we are discussing the scriptures and things of that nature. But sometimes for me, I have to take things on a metaphysical level and just look at things from a very practical point of view. And so when you had expressed Bhajan as like the umbrella when it comes to everything that we are pursuing within our Krishna consciousness, it made me think about our heart posture and what that really looks like in relation to how we are engaging with one another and with the scriptures and our mind and just being more centered. And so when you were saying going beyond like the psychological level and into more of an ontological or spiritual reality of Bhajan, that's even more profound, because for me, when you really look at Bhajan and aparādh is not just about doing something wrong. It literally can disturb your whole spiritual vision.
Yes.
Your whole spiritual vision. And Bhajan to me is about your heart posture and the heart consciousness. It's how we go about reacting with everything in our reality. So that was very profound, and I just wanted to share that. I thank you for expressing that. And maybe, I don't know, just a special request. Maybe we could probably find ways to practically apply Bhajan in a way that we can always monitor cleansing that dirt off the mirror of the heart, so that we can have better spiritual vision in how we interact with one another and how we partake to the process of bhakti.
Very good. Very good. In fact, today's class was to discuss a sort of, by the mercy of Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur, he, and a lot of our acharyas, they've written, and the sort of pragmatic psychological impact is there, but it's kind of couched in the philosophy so much, it's not as easy to extract it. But Vishwanath Chakravartī Thakur, by doing this, writing in Mādhurya-kādambinī, he made it, even though he's still using Sanskrit language, everything, he brought it out as the facts of what's psychologically going on during the process of trying to do bhajan. And so it was really, really very, very merciful on his part, because even how will a devotee assess where they are in their advancement, everything is a very difficult thing when you just look at it from a philosophical point of view. But when you have these kind of metrics and you have these kind of revelations, you can kind of, if you're doing honest assessment of your bhajan life, you can kind of see what's happening. All right.
Yes, Baba. Thank you.
All righty. I want to talk to you later too. So you're in Ohio?
Yes, right now. Yes, Baba.
Okay. All right. Haribo.
Okay.
Very good.
Haribo.
Under 1 second. She mentioned that it could, the aparādh could. No, it definitely does affect. This is a definite thing. It's not that it could, it does.
Yeah. Yeah. The case you gave, And like you said, aparādh could be, and Bhumi, did you have, Gail, I'm coming, but Bhumi will give some deference to the seniority. Bhumi, was it something else? Was it longer or shorter?
Yeah. No, Mukunda, I just wanted to, because I was, I'm out here doing some stuff, watering and stuff, and part of it dropped out. But I was wondering if you could actually give some explanation of the 6 types of Vaishnava-aparādha, to beat a Vaishnava, to slander like this. And then I wanted to mention about there has to actually be a change in heart. And there's one purport in 2nd Canto, chapter 3, text 24. So if everyone could look that up after the class, this would help a lot.
Hey, Bhumi, can you put it in the chat too?
Mukunda, I'm not where I can put it in the chat.
Hey, somebody can put it in though. What's it quoted again, Bhumi? And then somebody can put it in.
2nd Canto, chapter 3, text 24.
Yeah, 2-3-24. 2-3-24. All right. So very quickly, the 6 kinds of aparādhas that can be made to a devotee are described in the Padma Purana. Hanti nidanti vai dveshti akrujate Vaishnavam. No. Hanti nidanti vai dveshti Vaishnavam navinandati. Krujate no hashanam darshane patanani sat. So this verse in Padma Purana says to blaspheme a devotee, ninda. Hanti means to harm a devotee physically. Dveshti means to maintain any envy towards a devotee. And even envy here means to not want to see somebody advance. I want to always keep us on the same peer group. So if I see somebody advancing, then especially there may be somebody who I see joined after me or something. No, they can never be above me. This is also dveshti, or a kind of envy. And Vaishnavam navinandati means to fail to welcome and please a Vaishnava. So at one point, during some of the discord between sanghas, there was an idea you can invite a Vaishnava, you can offer them some prasadam, allow them to take darshan of the deities, but they cannot speak or do kirtan. Well, what is the life of a Vaishnava? The life of a Vaishnava is kirtan and Hari-kathā. So how will they be happy by just taking prasadam or just taking a darshan of the deity? If they don't have the ability to glorify the Aniṣṭhitā, it is the most painful thing. So actually it exacerbates aparādha when you make restrictions like that. Now you may say, okay, can you speak a few words? So you have to give them some opportunity to glorify the Aniṣṭhitā. The other one is krujate, to become angry at a Vaishnava. And I think I expressed, we have to be very careful, even in our own familial dealings, in our fraternal dealings with devotees. Because if you think, oh, I've known this person as long as it's my friend, so I could speak to them in a really bad way with anger, no, that'll become aparādha. My daughter, son, husband, wife, etc., mother, father, if we become angry with them and somebody, this could be aparādha. So we have to be very, very mindful that these persons are not related to us just in the material sphere of husband, wife, children, etc., but they're also Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So we have to be very careful around how we deal with them. Understand? The last one is no harshanam darshane, that if you see a Vaishnava and you're unhappy, it's indicative of some envy in the heart. You understand? And in seeing a Vaishnava and not becoming happy, even if you don't say anything, if you don't do any actions, still you can become implicated in aparādha. So those are the 6 things that Bhumipati was mentioning. They're quoted from the Padma Purana, and of course our Goswamis have quoted it. Gail?
Mukunda, one last thing though. There's an article, and I put it on the Bhakti Intensive a couple weeks ago, the etymology, The Heart of Sri Krishna by Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. It's on Puru's site, BVMLU, under Srila Pramod Puri Maharaj, called The Heart of Sri Krishna. It's about Vaisṇava-aparādha.
Yep. That's where I first saw the definition, apagata iti aparādha. That literally the word aparādha means, apagata means to go against the flow of love that is imbibed or in prasana in the form of Srimati Radharani. To go against that flow of love is to go against Radharani, actually. This is what constitutes aparādha. Gail?
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Haribo. Yeah, a couple things. One is about committing aparādha against Vaishnava. When that, if you don't, I mean, yes, you should not commit aparādha against anybody, whether Vaishnava or not. But when you see behavior that just seems obvious that it's not like a good behavior, when is it aparad to like recognize that, and when is it, when is it something that you should say, well, he's a devotee, so I don't know what to think about that,
So yeah, so I gave a class one time on the three kinds of how you deal with something in terms of criticizing it. So there's criticism, or criticism, and critiquing something. Criticizing something involves a malice. In other words, I'm pointing out a fault in someone with no intention to find a resolution to it or make a better outcome. It's my own mood of envy. Oh, I got you now. Oh, you did this, you did that, and I'm finding the fault with it, and I'm criticizing. So there's some malicious intent there that doesn't produce a better outcome for the person or others. That's called criticizing. Criticism is to do the same thing, to point out the fault that's seen, right? And being indifferent. So you may not feel like I got you person in a gotcha moment, or I'm criticizing with malice, but I'm just indifferent, but I'm showing, yes, see, even that person fell down or something, right? Right? And I don't have any vested interest in making a better outcome. So that's criticism. They may sound alike, but they're actually very different in emotional content. Criticizing has malice. Criticism is indifference. So I'm going to point this out, but I don't really care the outcome. I'm just pointing it out, right? And it's almost very difficult between criticizing and criticism. They're very nuanced in terms of how far apart they are. Then the other thing is critiquing something. I've seen a fault in something, and in order to create a better outcome, I'm pointing out the fault along with the possible virtues that are there in that person, with the intent to try to create a better outcome out of that situation, right? So whatever rectification or purification that person may need to create the better outcome of on the path of bhakti, that's my interest in dealing with that issue. So I'm not criticizing or just doing criticism, either malice or indifference, but I'm critiquing it. If I don't point out the fault, how can we look for how to rectify it, and how can we look for a better outcome? So I gave a whole class on this one time, but that's how you avoid creating aparad and you create seva. Seva means I'm looking how I can see to make a better outcome. So rather than jump on Facebook and point out all the faults, right? Even when I'm responding to something that I am dealing with in terms of an issue, like I responded to the devotee I spoke about, I was critiquing the situation, not criticizing that person, and I wasn't indifferent to the plight, but I was looking how to deal with that in such a way for that person, if they can accept it, and for the overall audience who was reading it to have another perspective. So the better outcome is that others don't become doubtful based on the experience of this person, that they don't become hopeless. They spent 30 years and this is what happened. Oh, no, what? You understand? To avoid that, you have to critique the faults that were there in their practice. And that tenure is not an axiomatic association with advancement, but you actually have to have been doing Bhajan for 30 years. Being involved in a social dynamic for 30 years is not a guarantee of an outcome of pure bhakti, when relating that to practice of Krishna consciousness. Because as I wrote in the response to the person, if you were involved in 30 years of social dynamics in relation to the process of bhakti, but you never really understood the inner workings of bhakti, never understood sadhu-saṅga, never understood the actual practice of bhakti, and especially what is Trinadapi Sunich, and you simply stacked up one upadi after another. I was temple president, I became this, I became a guru, I became sannyasi, that, and you simply were living on the social dynamics of all of those things. You never breached the material dynamic. And so it doesn't matter whether it's 30 years or 50 years later, you can still be attacked by Maya. Now, if in addition to that you committed an aparad, well, the science of scripture is telling us, Vaiṣṇava-aparādha utte-hati-matta, upari-vai-chindi, taraya-yaya shukupata, that the leaves of bhakti, when the tree is uprooted by the nature of that aparādha, will dry up. Therefore, your taste in the process dried up. And therefore, it gave a void that allowed a whole epiphany to come in that you're now saying is a sudden epiphany about science. Even though having the association of a pure Vaiṣṇava, Srīla Prabhupada, suddenly you realize your high school science teacher was really the answer to all the mysteries of life early on. You understand? There's no doubt that you can see the scientific results. And if you know the person in the situation, and you can know some of the things that happen, you could directly see what was the effect of aparādha in this particular case. And that's not to be said with, see, I told you, you always this, and now that. If you're doing that, it's just an expression of your mouth. Now you're committing aparādha.
Right.
Wait, what was that? What was that? That example just now?
If you are just criticizing to point out the fault in that person with a sensibility, oh, see, just look, I told you. And you're trying to satisfy something within yourself. Shamsundar Prabhu, it's a, let me just address something right quick in the chat. It's a forum, and we'll get you tied into that forum. It's one of the disciples of Srila Pujapad Shanta Maharaj. So he's on the Zoom here today, and he wanted to try to understand what's the Bhakti intensive site. So if you're just criticizing and doing criticism, either with indifference or with malice, then you're now committing aparādha yourself. You understand? The fault of that person doesn't give a license for offending them. Asha Didi spoke that earlier.
Right.
So critiquing something, looking for the greater outcome for that person and others, is service.
Yeah. Can I,
You have another one, then I'll go to Trivikram Prabhu.
Yeah. When it comes to using other modalities while a person is involved in their bhajan life, right? So I'm thinking of the example of a person who feels that they need psychotherapy, right? They go to, yeah. So, when is engaging in another modality, when can it be seen as a way to support one's bhakti life? And when is it, when is it like an interference? Because obviously, if you're going to engage in some other modality, it's going to require some time. And that whatever time you spend there is going to be taken away from maybe potential time that you could have spent doing something that was directly bhakti. But on the other hand, you can say, well, maybe that's not true necessarily, because if you didn't get the support from the other modality, you wouldn't have been engaged in bhakti anyway, because you need it. Yeah. So when is it like an interference?
So let me explain. So I did a whole class on this as well. There's a difference between acute medical or psychological needs and doing something because it pacifies a sensibility in me in the mode of material goodness. I have bipolar, or I'm schizophrenic, or I have some other really serious thing which may have been triggered by childhood trauma, any number of things, but it needs medical intervention. I cannot break my arm and say, well, I'm just not going to the doctor to get it reset and get it corrected because it'll take time away from bhakti. So where we recognize, whether it's physical or mental, an acute issue that needs to be addressed, then that is prudence. That's not interfering with our faith in bhakti. When we don't have an acute problem, but we have a sensibility of something that's nourishing, like there are many modalities, I'm not naming them, but there's many modalities which talk about how to feel better about yourself, right? This is not coming from an acute psychological problem. It's just a issue where I want to hear a better way to feel good about myself walking a difficult path like bhakti. So I go to this modality and I'm there with other people, and we all speak about various things which are all centered around I and mine. And the leader of that modality has marketed the modality in such a way as to make it centered on I and mine. You understand? So sometimes those things feel very good because they're in the mode of goodness. And I mentioned many times in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned there that the nature of the mode of goodness is prakashakam anamayam. Anamayam means a sense of, I'm good, I'm peaceful. Prakashakam means because I'm feeling an illumination coming from not transcendence, but the material mode of sattva gun. A result of that is shukka sangena badnati jnana sangena cha. That the information acquired from that modality and the way I feel, right? Though it's not transcendent, it's not spiritual. It's in the mode of material goodness, but it feels good. So now I'm saying to validate it or to make it justifiable, this is helping me to do bhakti. You understand? So sometimes this is not, remember we went over the anarthas, and one of the anarthas is a sense of kutanati, not being, or a sense of duplicitousness, not being honest, that really I'm not practicing bhakti genuinely. And I don't want to feel the sensibility that comes from the lack of practice when I know I should. So by doing this other modality, it gives me another sensibility within the mode of material goodness that makes me feel okay. It's like an out. I'll give you a comparison. Yeah, I'll give you a comparison. Really much of Occidental medicine deals with treating symptoms, not treating the original cause of a disease, which could be diet, living habits, and so many things. But the industry itself is geared around helping you to deal with the symptoms of that. So if you have a headache, it'll tell you to take, NSAID or some aspirin or whatever it might be to alleviate the symptoms of the headache. But if the headache is born from bad dietary habits or bad living habits, the aspirin or NSAID or whatever is not going to help. You understand? You have to change the lifestyle. And sometimes people revert to the idea, well, I'm not going to give up eating my favorite food, so I'm going to go ahead and take these NSAIDs because I'm just going to, you understand? So in the same way, we could look at bhakti like that. Now remember, bhakti is also, the genesis of bhakti is in faith. And faith starts out as the very thing which is able to have the power to turn us towards bhakti, but it's also the track on which bhakti runs. It's not that we have an initial faith and now, okay, we're it. Your bhakti is running on the track of faith. So it's progression. I'm quoting the verse. Shraddhavan jan hai, bhakti adhikari, kanishta majam uttam, shraddha anusari. Your advancement through the stage of kanishta to majam to uttam, shraddha anusari means it's following the dedication of your faith. Your faith becomes complete, not complete, but mature. Shraddha shabde vishwasha kohe sudrida nishchaya Krishna bhakti koila sava kama kritta hoy. When the epiphany comes to me, that bhakti is everything and can solve everything. Now it doesn't remove prudence. It's freezing cold outside, but because I'm practicing bhakti, I won't put on a coat. It's a very dangerous area I'm going to, but I'm just going to walk through there because I'm practicing bhakti. I have a deep psychological problem. I'm actually experiencing bipolar or something else. And I'm just not going to just because bhakti can do everything. It's not speaking to that. So I gave you the breakdown of when there's genuine, acute psychological or medical issue versus when it's just a sensibility, I want to feel better. And I'm not experiencing it in bhakti because of the lack of my development or maturity in my bhajan life. So let me come back, Gail, and let me get Trivikram and Bhumipati. I'll come back to you, though.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Trivikram Prabhu?
I'll let Bhumipati Prabhu go first.
Haribo. Very good. Proper etiquette. Bhumi Prabhu?
Yeah, Mukunda, I just wanted to mention a couple of more verses that people can look up because, about critiquing, there's also an etiquette. According to the level of the Vaishnava, he may be doing something that's not in line with what you think it should be. So you should actually maybe consult a more advanced Vaishnava and tell him about it. Because in one sense, that goes in a very delicate situation. And in third canto, chapter 29, I think like the first 12 verses, I think from verse 7 to 12, It describes devotional service in the mode of ignorance, devotional service in the mode of passion, devotional service in the mode of goodness, then actual pure devotion. You know, Lord Kapila Dev is speaking to his mother, Devahuti. So this gives you an idea of how to go about, especially in the mode of ignorance. Prabhupada mentions in that purport, you should offer obeisances from afar to that individual. And it doesn't mean that later on in life that person is going to keep that same mentality, because the process does work. And maybe if he consults a more advanced Vaishnava, you can't come back 20 years later and say, oh, I remember how he did that. No, that's not good either. So, because the process of bhakti is progressive, it continues to move. It doesn't stand still.
Yes. And also, even approaching the Vaishnava themselves with proper humility and making a proper inquiry on that basis. Now, if you're shut down by that Vaishnava because of maybe the mindset he or she is in, then also, as Bhumipati is mentioning, approaching another senior Vaishnava, whom that Vaishnava may have more ability to digest because they have regard for that Vaishnava due to the tenure, whatever, they may be able to digest that Vaishnava approaching them rather than someone they consider younger, et cetera, et cetera. It should not matter really if they're humbly approached. But sometimes because of the condition they're in, and pride may be part of it, it may be difficult. So at that time, very humbly, we shouldn't take any, affront to it. We should just say, oh, okay, I tried to approach and it was not possible. I may speak to a more senior Vaishnava. Understand? But we may speak to the Vaishnava, and the Vaishnava may actually reveal something that reconciles what we see, or they may be confessional in whatever they're lacking in at that time, saying, oh, I'm glad you had enough love and affection for me to come and point this out. So that'll encourage both that Vaishnava and the younger Vaishnava how the process works in a deep way. Trivikram Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. I think that after ruminating a little bit, it would probably be best for me to take my questions to you personally. I think they're a little more personal than the group setting would be appropriate. So if we can talk soon, that would be great. But I don't want to bring my questions to the floor right now.
Okay, perfect. That's always available. All right, I think, Gail, I'll come back to you because I promised I would. And then I think afterwards we'll go to Chaitanya Mangal. So you got one more, Gail, and then I'll go to Chaitanya Mangal. I think we'll begin to wind up there because I have some devotees coming by.
Oh, is my turn again?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, I just wanted to understand a little better when you were saying that, the chanting of the mantra goes hand in hand with hearing the Bhagavatam, right? So, the mantra is the personification, right, of Radha and Krishna.
Yes.
And so when we hear the Bhagavatam, did you say that's like the energy of?
No, it's like the personality. In other words, like you may know someone and you know of them. You have not met them, you know of them. So one of the first things you may want to do is you may want to do some research, their biography, their various things they like, don't like, so many different things, because that research is giving you an insight into the personality of those persons. You know the name and you know the form, but their personality you'll find out by research. Now, when you get to meet them and they then also give you so much information about themselves, you don't see them and their persona as being separate. You don't see the name of the person and the form of the person as being separate from all the knowledge you have about them. They're kind, they're magnanimous, they're wealthy, they're this, they're that, so many different things. You don't separate those things. So when you think about that person, axiomatically, all of those qualities which you know about them come to the forefront of your consciousness. You don't associate that they're separate from the person. Like an example, you can hear a record today of an artist, even if that artist is no longer present. As soon as you hear the record, it's associated with that artist.
As soon as you. No.
Yes, so Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is not really different from Harināma. It's not two separate things. They're one reality. It's called Advaya Gyan Paratattva. They're one reality.
Right. But, I'm just trying to understand the statement that, chanting the Maha Mantra. I've heard this concept before, and it makes sense, but I'm still trying to reconcile with the fact that, the mantra is everything. So if a person just wanted to chant the mantra, it doesn't need any help from any. The Bhagavatam is the
Here's the question.
Embodiment. He's a person.
Hold on one second. You said the mantra is everything. What is the everything?
All that exists, including the personalities of Radha and Krishna.
Right. So what is Bhagavatam?
The same.
That's my point.
But in our line, we don't say just read the Bhagavatam,
No, because the Bhagavatam is the personality. Can you have the personality without the persona?
No.
Right? Just like if I was to tell you, so yeah, they're rich, they live in this place, what's your question going to be after that?
Well, who is it?
So the Harinam is telling you the who. Bhagavatam is telling you the what. You understand?
Okay, so
they're inextricable. You can't separate them. Or you'll be incomplete. Just like if I told you all the information, you'll say who. If you start telling me, John, you don't tell me anything, I'm going to ask you, not only who is John, but what is that? What does that mean to me? So you can't separate the realities of the personality from the person, personification of the person. So Krishna is Nam, Rup, Gun, Parika, Leela. Jiva Goswami is written in Bhakti Sandarbha, this flow. It's called Kram Sopan Nritya. This is the crumb in how the name unfolds. When you begin chanting, it appears as a purificatory process. That's why you're calling it a mantra. It's really Radha and Krishna. It's not really a mantra. It's Radha and Krishna. So, but we think of it as a mantra, as a modality in the beginning, because we're only experiencing it as 32 Sanskrit syllables, which are purificatory in their function. When we're more mature, we relate it to the personifications of the deities, Radha and Krishna. Afterwards, when we're more mature, there's the understanding that Radha and Krishna are related by prem. So the prem brings them together, and we see the 8 names of Radha and Krishna as a yugal, means a pair, because they're always united in love. You understand? So this is the elements of the maturation. Now the name, practically speaking, when you're chanting, it starts to reveal itself. First is Nam, then Rup. In other words, you associate the Nam with the Rup of Krishna. Gun, then with the qualities of Krishna. Where will you understand the qualities and the descriptions of the nature of Krishna? Let's say there were no deities. Where will you get the description of what Krishna looks like?
The Bhagavatam.
Huh?
The Bhagavatam.
Haribol.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? You understand? These descriptions are given there. All these sastras are describing these things. So now the sastras become one with your Nam and is revealing Nam, Rup, the gun, the qualities. Then the parika, the associates who are serving Bhagavan, because they have the kind of desire, they have the kind of love that you desire to obtain in your service. Then the parika and their seva, then the leela is the last thing that unfolds. Then when you're chanting, the whole leela, whether it be a naimittic leela, ashtakaliya leela, you understand? Kalachita leela means like Vidagdha Madhava, Lalit Madhava, books that are written by Goswamis were actual leelas of Krishna that manifested to them. Naimittic leelas are what's described in Bhagavatam, which kind of repeat themselves throughout the material universes. The Nitya leela is the eternally manifest leela of 8-fold daily pastimes in the spiritual world.
But, I understood what you said, but shouldn't the Holy Name reveal all of this?
No, because
on its own?
no. because the acharyas are telling how to get the revelation. So I've given those 5 things. Nam, Sankirtan, what's the next thing? Sadhu-saṅga. You understand? So the acharyas are telling you how revelation takes place. You understand? So you have to follow the teachings of the acharyas. So they're telling that the first thing you have to do is called Guru Padasraya. This is the first thing Rupa Goswami mentions. He could have mentioned just chant Hare Krishna. But he said, do Guru Padasraya, Tata Diksha Shikshadi, Vishrambena Guru Seva, Sadhu Vatmanu Vatmanam. So he's giving the sequence of how to get the revelation. We have to follow those things or the revelations will never come.
So delicately. It's right there. It's delicate.
All right.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
All right. Chaitanya Mangal Prabhu.
Dandavats, Gurudev. When you were mentioning criticism and critique, isn't it also important how we receive the information? You know, how our emotions, take, because sometimes our emotions seem to take over based on what we hear and what we're thinking about ourselves and what we think that whether it's criticism or being critiqued.
That is such a good point, because how you express it and how somebody receives it is always different. So you can be critiquing something and somebody will take it as criticism. You understand? So that we have to work through the dynamics with that person to show them how it's critique, because my outcome for you is what I'm wishing, a better outcome. You understand? Now, sometimes in the emotional space of that person, they can't hear it at the time. I think this is also related to Tulsi's earlier question about the dynamics of interpersonal relationships and so forth, and how aparādhas can happen because there's some ambiguity around how to do things in interpersonal relationships. So you're making an excellent point. So one way that we have to do critique, and Bhumipati brought this up, a lot of it has to be in a great mood of humility. You understand? It has to be in a great mood of humility. So if the person can perceive it's coming from a humble place, they feel less apt to challenge it. Now, some people are so deeply in a space where they're uncomfortable that they, like, if you become uncomfortable around something, you automatically become defensive, right? You walk into a dark room, right? You're going into a building and the building is dark. Then you automatically have some apprehension. You understand? I remember I was working one day, just to give you an example. So I was working when I was on a police department, and we were working with the DEA. And so we had to do observations of certain buildings and stuff. So to get a place to look at the building without being seen, we were going into abandoned buildings and sort of posting up in the abandoned building. Now, in all of these abandoned buildings, there's rats, and I don't do rats. So every time, and not only I, but the 3 people that were with me as well, as we're walking through the building, everybody's like grabbing each other. Oh, what, right? And it's simply because it's dark in the building and we're all in an apprehensive mood about either rats or something else being in there. You understand? So the natural state of being in a position where you feel vulnerable creates a defensive mechanism. You understand? It creates a defensive mechanism. So when people are in a place where they're feeling vulnerable, just like there's many times when, again, with the rise of the doubt culture, I'm calling it, which is where people, when they're not fulfilled in bhakti, there's a tendency to look for the lack in bhakti before looking at the lack in their ability to practice it. So then they post in the form of devotees these things because they're looking for validation through consensus. Yeah, I'm also going through that. Yeah, perhaps it doesn't work. Perhaps this isn't the truth. Perhaps this, perhaps that. And when you critique that stance by saying, well, perhaps it was the misapplication of your experience with bhakti due to whom you're associating with. Perhaps it was that you didn't get past your upadis, and therefore your material sensibilities were impacting how you were practicing. Those persons sometimes, based on the depth of where they are, will feel that that's an attack rather than critique. Just because of where they're situated, they feel like they're being attacked. When actually you're simply pointing out things as another perspective to look at it, with the hope that the outcome will be, yeah, maybe through more self-introspection, then maybe I could, humbly take a look at it. But people are very defensive. So a lot of times when I'm writing on these things, I'm writing not just for that person, but for others who are seeing it. So that others who are not the object or not the so-called focus of the critique can do that same thing in themselves now. Because if they were trying to digest what this person was saying, they can, without being the object of the conversation, sort of as an observer, look at it and say, yeah, let me think about that. Perhaps this was some good points. Maybe I need to look at myself closer. And even if writing can say, yeah, this is good for my self-edification. I also need to look at myself.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Guru. Yeah.
All right, I think we're going to end here. Anuradha, if you're on, can we have some kirtan? And I think we will end here. Is Anuradha on? She was earlier.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Gurudeva Śrīla Gurudeva Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Śrīla Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol
Hari Bol, Dandavats. So we're getting closer to the intensive as well.